So we want to begin with our first session. And so this first session is where's the line? Understanding the immigration process. There's a lot of confusion about what it takes to actually immigrate to the United States. Many people say, well, hey, my grandparents came and they did things the right way, but laws have changed, especially around 1920, 1965. And so we want to understand this process of what it takes to come into the United States. And with us for this presentation, we have Anne Marie Dooley. She is a board-certified immigration law specialist with McKinney Immigration Law, and she graduated from the University of Georgia with a degree in business administration, and she got her law degree here at UNC. And so, Anne Marie, if you would share with us, please.
All right, thank you so much. When we started when we started looking at doing a program on immigration, the border was the issue, right? Everybody's talking about the border, what's happening at the border. And as we started planning that, we realized that it's complex what's going on at the border, and that it might be helpful for people who don't really understand our immigration system to start with an Immigration 101 so people understand where the lines are. Because I hear all the time, my parents did it the right way, why don't people just get in line? So really when we're talking about that, you're comparing apples to oranges, right? Before 1920, we had very little laws limiting immigration. So if the biggest struggle was just getting here, right? If you could get here, for the most part, you could stay. Even the few restrictions there really wasn't enforcement. So if your family came before 1920, it's just not a fair comparison. And even after 1920, we moved to a quota system, okay? And that was based on the demographics of the United States at that time. And so, because the United States was populated with mostly Western Europeans, that's who was favored under that system. And then in 1965, we moved to our current system, which is a preference-based system, and that system gives preference to close family members and certain employees. Okay, so there are guiding principles for our immigration system. Our family-based immigration is about reuniting families. Our employment-based, it's about attracting immigrants with skills that are valuable to the U.S. economy. We want to protect refugees and asylees. We have humanitarian programs that would include victims of violent crimes and trafficking victims. And then we also want to promote diversity. And so, because of our early immigration was heavily Western European, the diversity program is literally a lottery, and it looks at countries where we have very low immigration, and if the Department of State puts out a list, and if you're from one of those countries, you can apply for the lottery. And it's capped. It's a very low percentage of the people that actually apply through the lottery, but that's another way that we bring people in. So, Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about the family category, because there's a lot of misinformation about who can immigrate. It really has to be a close family member. So for U.S. citizens, a U.S. citizen can sponsor their parents, they can sponsor their spouses, they can sponsor their children, and they can sponsor their siblings. If you're a lawful permanent resident, it's limited to your spouse and your unmarried children. And most of those categories are subject to caps. There are no cousin petitions. You can't bring your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents. It's really very limited to immediate relatives. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the lines, because there's a lot of misinformation about that. These are the family lines. So the first category, the F1, is for adult children of U.S. citizens, unmarried children. F2A is spouses and unmarried children under 21 for permanent residents. F2B are children that are over 21, unmarried permanent residents. F3 are your married children of U.S. citizens, and then F4 is the category for siblings. You can see, I put in red, some of these lines are over 20 years long. Okay, so for example, my daughter, Erin, she's in her late 20s. So if I am a U.S. citizen naturalized from Mexico, and for some reason Erin was too old to be included in my green card application, now's my time to petition for her. Well, she's going to be over 50 years old by the time she can join me in the United States. Okay, so when we talk about these lines, it's really important for people to understand it's just not practical. I mean, I don't want to be separated from my daughter for 20 years. And so this is what we're talking about. Next, oh, nope, back. And you can see this is for the employment base, and it's similar. I mean, some of the lines, especially for foreign nationals from India, it's over 10 years long. And so for the employment base, it's important for you to understand how this system works. An employer at the beginning of the process has to establish that today there's not a minimally qualified U.S. worker to fill a position that they have. There's nobody. I mean, they go through a process, they do recruitment, they have to prove to the Department of Labor there's not a U.S. worker. Then they can start this process. Even the shorter lines, I mean, we're talking 2 to 3 years, but I have a need today. So the system doesn't work very well for employers either. Okay. So you can see there are some issues with our current system. There are outdated caps. The visa cap haven't been changed in decades. So we've got it. It doesn't meet the needs of families. It definitely doesn't meet the needs of businesses. Backlogs. Anybody who has been working in immigration knows we are seeing historic backlogs. Let's say that I've completed my visa application and I'm from Mexico and I am ready to go. I'm at the front of the line ready. It's taking 2 years to get an interview in Ciudad Juarez. At USCIS, it's taking about 2 to 2.5 years to get a green card application through. I think Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about the courts, but the backlogs, I mean, if someone's put into removal proceedings today, it could be 2 years or more before they even have their first appearance in immigration court. So we're seeing historic backlogs that just are crippling the system. We've got 12 million estimated undocumented people that are living in limbo. I read a statistics, about 60% of those people have been living here for more than 10 years. So these aren't people that are in and out. These are people who've made their lives here. They have families, they have businesses. And so what are we going to do with those people? And 5.5 million U.S. citizen children are living in mixed status families. Now, past presidents have tried to address immigration reform, and there's been people wanted to do something comprehensive. So you had even George W. Bush tried to get through comprehensive immigration reform. President Obama tried to get it through. And when we couldn't even get DREAM Act, President Obama took executive action. And so on June 15th, 2012, he announced deferred action for childhood arrivals. And I can tell you when DACA was announced, I know that I think a lot of immigration attorneys were hopeful that this was just like pre-DREAM and that we would be getting DREAM pretty soon, that this was like pre-screening people so that we would get DREAM and then those people who had DACA would be able just to move right in. So for DACA, for people to qualify for DACA, they had to be under 31 years old when the program was announced on June 15th. They had to enter the United States before they were 16. They had to live continuously in the United States for 5 years prior to the announcement. So they had to be here from June 15th of 2007. So this idea that DACA was what caused this surge of migrant children, it just isn't true. Nobody who entered after June 15th of 2007 qualified for DACA. You had to graduate from high school or to be currently enrolled in school. And then they did background checks for people, so you couldn't have a criminal record. This was a really big deal, okay? When DACA passed, I mean, for young people, they could get driver's licenses, they could get Social Security cards, they could get jobs, they could work lawfully, they were buying houses, they were going to college. I mean, it was life-changing. Now, in North Carolina, DACA recipients still don't qualify for in-state tuition. which we've done programs on that. I think it's pretty short-sighted, but there are states where students do qualify for in-state tuition, and they also still cannot enlist in the military. Well, where is DACA now? When the program was initially implemented, over 800,000 young people applied and were granted DACA status. And then under the Trump administration, on September 15, 2017, Attorney General Sessions announced they were going to rescind DACA. That has changed everything. I don't think that USCIS has processed any new applications since that time. And so the program pretty much stopped. It's been in litigation. And in June of 2020, the Supreme Court said that the way the Trump administration went about ending the program was unlawful. Not that they couldn't end it, but the way that they did it. And so DACA is very much in the air. We don't know what's going to happen with DACA. There's a current injunction in place that prohibits any new applications of DACA, and the current DACA program is making its way through the courts. It's been challenged on the legality of the current program. Okay, I'm not going to do a lot on the southern border, but I did want to touch on it because it's such a big issue, and there may be people here that are not going to be here this afternoon. So I just put a few statistics about it. Now, this data comes from the Department of Homeland Security, and I could only get data through 2021. But during this time, in 2021, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, processed 1.7 million people under Title 42. Now, it was estimated that the increase in encounters was 82%, but that's a little misleading because they weren't unique encounters. During Title 42, people were being expelled very quickly, so they would just turn around and try to come back in. And so only about 30% increase during this time of unique encounters. One of the key changes, though, is historically when we were having these surges at the border or these people coming in, it was people from Mexico. It was young men from Mexico coming to work. And so we saw prior to 2010, it was 90% of border encounters were Mexican nationals. In 2021, it was only 28%. And one of the biggest changes is it wasn't single men coming to work, families were coming. And so that raises a lot of challenges. So why are people coming? Climate change, people are, not able to feed themselves. Crime and violence, we've heard about increased cartel and gang violence in Central America. Unstable governments, Haiti, look what's going on in Haiti and Venezuela. And then extreme poverty. I had a client one time, and I tell the story to illustrate, but when I had a removal case, and I was talking to the son. He had DACA, and his dad was in removal proceedings. And I asked him, I said, "What do you remember about your country?" And he said, "I remember following the chicken." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, my mom would send us out in the morning to go follow the chicken and see where she laid her egg. And we'd take that egg back, and we would divide it. If they were a family of 4, they would divide the egg 4 ways. And they would put it on the tortilla so it would have an egg taste on it. And when they got the last tortilla, he would eat his portion of the egg." He was hungry. He remembered being hungry. And so that's why people come. And, it's not because they're trying to break laws or anything. They're coming because they're desperate. Okay. Next slide. So these are just some things that have been proposed as solutions. There are a lot of, it is complicated, very, very complicated. We have to address what's going on at the border. It's just not sustainable, the number of people coming through. And so what that looks like, I don't know. Some of the proposals, there was a Senate emergency spending bill. It was increasing funding to the border, but there were due process concerns about that. But something is going to have to be done because what we have now is just not sustainable. We need DREAM Act. We got to do something for all these DACA recipients. And these are things that shouldn't be controversial. I don't think, I mean, polls have shown that people support giving a pathway to citizen for young people that came to the United States as children. Employment-based immigration. We've got to, a lot of international students come to our universities and gain all of this wonderful knowledge in STEM fields and stuff, but then they can't get sponsorship because of the caps that we have in place. And so they're going to other countries. We're losing all that talent. We're training them and sending them out to other countries. So we need to expand the H-1B program and employment-based immigration to meet the needs of our country. Expand guest worker programs. It's very limited. We have agricultural workers that come in and seasonal workers, but it's not enough. I mean, if you look at the farms and I mean, they're in construction and landscape, we've got a lot of people who are here undocumented. We need to expand. There's obviously a need for these workers, so we need to expand it so that they can come legally. Not everybody wants to immigrate to the United States, but because of the way our laws are, it makes it very difficult for people to come and go. We need to do something about the 12 million people, right? We can't deport our way out of this. And so finding, there was a proposal under the Obama administration for a pathway, earned legalization, where people would pay back taxes and it would be a conditional residency. I think it took 10 years or something to actually become full permanent residents. So they pay back taxes, pass security checks, do all of those things. But short of that, we could do something about these bars. I talked about family immigration, but even if you have the right family member to sponsor you, there are a lot of people that can't adjust their status or consular process because of these bars. If you enter the United States without permission, then in most cases you have to leave and go back through the embassy in your country. Well, if you've been in the United States for more than 1 year without permission, you're going to trigger a bar to coming back, a 10-year bar. If you re-enter without getting a waiver for that bar, it's a permanent bar. So you have all of these people who are stuck. They can't leave to go fix their status because they're going to trigger either this 10-year bar or this permanent bar. And so even getting rid of the bars would allow a lot of these people, it would open up the lines for these people. But those are just some things, like I said, the bars, eliminating bars, those things that shouldn't be controversial, and it would open up avenues for people to legalize their status. So this is just a very brief overview. I know we had some questions. I think it is complicated, like Rob said. It's very, very complicated, but this just gives you an idea of the complexity of the system.
So FlowGSO, when I was young, I used to go to New Orleans a lot. I had family members there. And the street buskers were my favorite part of it. I just thought it was amazing to be able to walk out and see all these people doing crazy feats, sharing their art, sharing their music. And I wanted to live in a city where that happened. So my philosophy behind it was, well, someone has to start doing it. if I start showing up, maybe more people will start showing up. And maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but the year after that, this might be the type of city where there's plenty of people out on the streets busking and having fun and showcasing their skills. So I just wanted to try to bring this art form to the streets, but I didn't have a performance art. So learning to juggle was just, juggling was my language that I used to translate my ideals to the streets.
Your party just gave me on the phone?
Just witnessed an airplane crash into the World Trade Center.
Italian 1 to Manhattan. Say what?
Italian 1. We just had a plane crash into upper floor of the World Trade Center, transmit a second alarm, and start relocating companies into the area. Italian 1 is also sending the whole consignment on this box to that area, okay?
Everybody stand by so we get on some border here.
Engine 6 to Manhattan, Engine 6. The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building, there was just a huge explosion. 10-4, all companies stand by at this time. There's been a second alarm on that box immediately. 10-4. Engine 1 on Manhattan. Engine 1-0. Engine 1-0, World Trade Center, 1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
Soldier Boys said they wanted no hollow granite, no useless monument to decorate our street corners, even no sanctuaries or brass to remind us of those who have passed along after doing life's full duty. But they wanted something that would be useful, that would help develop mind and body, that would in this way be a perpetual memorial to those who have passed. That those of us who follow after should use our best efforts to make ourselves physically fit to answer any emergency. And when the call to duty comes, answer with clear, strong voice. We are ready to do our bit.
Morning, wide
So nice to see you. We're gonna kick your butt tonight.
But that's the same. I always thought they were wider.
23 to nothing.
Well, yeah, I always thought the lockers were wider than this. I thought it was like this.
I don't think so. Yeah, they might. I don't.
Because I tore one of them up with a bat.
Did you?
Yeah. And management told me afterwards, said that's going to cost you $250. And I figured, well, I wouldn't get to eat for the next week or so.
Of course, is the beautiful stage area in Proscenium that we're very famous for. And it does date back to 1927. October 31st is our birthday, Halloween, the first opening night of the Carolina Theater in 1927.
Also, it's really kind of true that aging itself doesn't really hurt, but we've been socially have been conditioned to expect to hurt. You know, if I get arthritis, I'm going to hurt. It's because I'm old. No, it's because you've got arthritis.
do things on the fly.
Yeah.
Really, you like to know and kind of plan. I guess you sketch it out beforehand.
Yeah, and usually, I mean, it depends on the project, especially for if I'm doing something for the city of wherever I am, city of Atlanta or city, you know, I
Once again, number 39, Chris Mosley.
Both Isha and Kane caught the dance addiction.
Sincerely.